Okay, AP Lit kids. So I just want to briefly talk to you about the exam you'll be taking at the end of the course, which at this point has not been changed or modified. I'm not going to extensively talk about every little tiny piece, but I do want you to get a sense of sort of functionally at the end of this year, what are you going to be looking at? We will do a lot of practice tests. We will prepare you. We'll make sure that you've seen lots of examples of the types of selections that you might see. But I really just sort of wanted to give you a basic overview. So this is from the College Board. This is literally how they have written up the exam. Some sort of basic overview questions. It's a 3-hour long test. You will sit and take it, just like you have historically sit and taken AP tests. It is done by hand unless something changes. It's 55 multiple choice questions and 3 essays, 3 writing responses. And all of that is timed and weighted. So the multiple choice questions take about 60 minutes of the test. They're 45% of your ultimate score. The free response questions are 2 hours of the test. There's 3 of them, so that equates out to about 40 minutes per essay. To be clear, you get a 2-hour block to do all 3 essays. So you could take 60 minutes on the hardest essay and 30 minutes on the other 2 essays if they're a little easier. You get to allot that time. But the recommendation is 40 minutes per essay. And those free responses are 55% of your score. And this is what sort of works together to ultimately give you a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. The free response questions, one of them will be a poetry selection, one of them will be a prose selection, often an excerpt from a novel or play. And then the third one will be what they call a literary argument. You will not get a selection. Instead, you'll get a prompt and you will choose a text to use to analyze. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So these are our big ideas. We've talked about this sort of briefly. Character is the first one that we're really focusing on. But we will also talk about setting, we'll talk about textual structure, we'll talk about narration, point of view, perspective, voice, all of that stuff. We'll talk about figurative language, not in its own unit, but all the way through. And then, of course, literary argumentation. But these are the sort of big things that are being assessed in the text. The test. So don't worry too much about the specific units here. We don't follow exactly the College Board units, but you will be reading short fiction, poetry, and long fiction and drama this year. You'll be reading Hamlet is our drama piece. You'll be reading Things Fall Apart is our longer fiction unit. And rather than having individual separate short fiction and poetry units, there will be some like that. But for the most part, these things will be embedded into these units. But just to sort of see how much you see on a text. You see a lot of short fiction, lots of short stories, almost half of what you see on the test, and a lot of poetry. So we are going to focus a lot on your ability to assess, analyze, and dig into poetry and shorter fiction. So how is your learning assessed? This is all just data and statistics from College Board. I think this is important that like you're almost definitely going to be asked, looks like about a quarter of your exam is narration, speaker, voice, point of view, perspective, that kind of stuff. And about a fifth of your test is character. So these 2 things are going to be really, really important. And of course, plot and structure, and that's going to connect. All of this is going to connect to theme. But just sort of how the test comes together. These are the types of questions you're asked and how much of the test they take up. So there's 3 free response questions, okay? The first one is going to be a poetry selection. You will have a passage of poetry. You'll be directed to read it, to annotate it, use that TP-cast structure, and then you will get a prompt. And the prompt will ask you to develop a thesis statement and a line of reasoning, and then to show the to provide some evidence and to show the relationship between the evidence, the quotations, the textual evidence that you've provided, and your thesis, and to put together a response that is about 100 to 300 words. So not a terribly long essay, but you do need to put together a thesis and a solid line of reasoning, which can be very challenging in 40 minutes. So here's just a sample. In the poem Plants by Olive Senior, the speaker portrays the relationship among plant life and the implied audience. Read the poem carefully. Then, in a well-written essay, analyze how Senior uses poetic elements and technique to develop those complex relationships. So you'll get this sort of, this type of prompt, but there will always be a poem to analyze in this way. Then the second one will be a prose analysis, which will either be drama or fiction. This is a longer essay, 500 to 700 words, so twice the length of your poetry response. You are developing a thesis. You're developing a line of reasoning that supports that thesis that relies on evidence, and then you're connecting the evidence to your thesis. With each step, with each prompt in the AP test, it's going to be thesis, evidence, analysis, and sort of connecting all those pieces together. So again, sample prompt. The following is an excerpt from an 1852 novel by Nathaniel Hawthorne. In the passage, two characters who've been living on the Blythedale farm, a community designed to promote the idea of equality achieved through communal rural living, are about to part ways. Read the passage carefully. Then, in a well-written essay, analyze how Hawthorne uses literary elements and techniques to portray the narrator's complex attitudes towards Zenobia. So again, sort of just sample, broad prompt, and then you would respond to that 500 to 700 words. My favorite part of the lit test, and the part that I think is kind of the coolest and most interesting structure, is this literary argument piece, which is a piece where you will be getting some kind of concept, idea, prompt, and then a list of like 40 books. And you are you're choosing a book. It can be from the list. I am going to recommend you choose from the list, or it can be another book that has what they call it literary merit. So, a literary text that connects to the idea or the question in the prompt. And then you're providing from your own memory of this book you've read a way that text connects to the prompt. Obviously, you're not going to be able to quote from that text unless you have pieces of it memorized, but you still need to have a thesis and evidence, right? That evidence can be specific summary, specific moments of the text that you want to draw on, just not quotations, and then a line of reasoning. So this is really cool. So here's your sample prompt. Many works of literature feature characters who've been given a literal or figurative gift. The gift may be an object or it may be a quality, such as uncommon beauty, significant social position, great mental or imaginative faculties, or extraordinary physical powers. Yet this gift is often also a burden or a handicap. Either from your own reading or from the list below, choose a work of fiction in which a character has been given a gift that is both an advantage and a problem. Then, in a well-written essay, analyze how the gift and its complex nature contribute to an interpretation of the work as a whole. Do not merely summarize the plot. So this is fabulous, right? You could pick any book in which a character gets a gift that sort of serves this double-edged purpose. You would receive here at the bottom a list of books that fit that you may or may not have read. This is why we do so much reading in AP Lit. Why every marking period you'll be doing at least one, if not two, additional independent reading books, so that by the time you sit down for this test, even the books that are just fresh in your mind, the books that you've read this year, you have a list of 6 or 7 or 8 books that are like fresh right in your mind, ready to go. So that is the AP test, sort of in a nutshell. And hopefully this has kind of helped you get a sense of what you're going to be asked to do. What you're going to look at today is a poetry selection, and two prose, or you'll be, depending on your last name, you'll be looking at a poetry selection or a selection from a piece of fiction or a selection from a play. And these are all selections that were actually on recent AP tests. So enjoy them, read them, annotate them, and we will be moving forward with all of this tomorrow. Have a great day.